from our last guest is, who's your biggest inspiration, and do you feel like they've shaped you as an artist? And I've got a little thing to add on to that at the end, but I want to hear your answer to that first.
So I feel like it's always hard for me to pick one person at this point, but if I were to like pinpoint a moment in time where things kind of clicked for me, it was probably when I got into Tool. Adam Jones as a guitar player always kind of had a really unique style, and I like the way that, you know, him and amongst other guitar players I'll mention in a second, like fill out a lot of sound as one guitar player. And you know, the ability he's able to bring to the table of like you know, leads, rhythm, riffs, and just kind of like big chords and stuff like that make it sound like more than one person sometimes. I feel like that's always something that stood out to me. And so, you know, throughout listening to music over the years and stuff, there's a lot of different guitar players and just like musicians in general and bands as like, you know, whole projects that have inspired me in different ways to get to where I am now. But yeah, early on for a while, Tool was definitely a big factor in me wanting to, you know, take music more seriously and try to write songs myself. And then Deftones, Rage Against the Machine early on as well. And I, you know, a lot of the like, you know, Mars Volta, Isis, Opeth, there's like a lot of different bands that kind of in different ways kind of cater to what I like to do with music. But definitely early on, Tool, I would say, is a big part of that.
Yeah, I love that. The opening tone in Jambi is like one of my top few tones in
yeah. That's the other thing, the tones. Like his tones are really good. And I know he took that real seriously, especially like, you know, at a time when everybody was still using real amps and stuff like that all the time. I feel like he kind of had a unique tone, even just like when everyone was still doing the same thing. Whereas now I feel like you never really know what anyone's using. It could be Axe Effects, it could be real amps, there's just so much diversity now, I feel. But yeah, I feel like back then he still now I think has a unique tone. And a lot of that has to do with blending amps and different effects and stuff like that, plus the actual nuance of the guitar player. So I definitely took that away as well, like the delay and the kind of like ambient heaviness, sort of like that he did pretty often. Mostly with the leads probably, but yeah, he's cool.
Nice. Yeah, that's the other one you mentioned in terms of tone. I think possibly my favorite bass tone. Just well, I suppose maybe Carnival might have my favorite bass tone, but
for sure.
Yeah,
Simple Boy is one of the best. That's like a standard for bass tone, especially like distorted crunchy bass.
Yeah,
that Sound Awake is great.
I think I love in Goliath. Yeah, bum bum bum.
Yeah,
yeah. But the other one I was gonna say is Bulls on Parade. Just that opening riff on the bass, like with the bass element in that, just like
yeah. No, it's heavy. It's heavy, and it's crazy because back then I'm pretty sure Rage was in standard or a half step down at most, and then sometimes drop D, but they didn't go lower than that really. So to have that much heaviness has a lot to do with like the octaves and the interplay between the guitar and bass, and like when they both play a riff at the same time, and it just like hits even harder because of that. It's cool.
Yeah. So what I was going to say on top of that question, getting almost sort of getting a bit deep straight away with it, but I'm always interested in terms of how do you feel like music, and particularly the music of artists that you really love, like Tool and some of the others. I get the impression Tool is the main one from what you were saying, but do you feel like that music that you connect with sort of shapes you as a person as well?
Yeah, I think to some degree. I think you know, there's definitely times when, at least from my own personal experience, like, you know, talking about earlier, like we're talking about the weather and stuff like that. I think, you know, certain moods around you will inspire you to want to hear different kinds of music, maybe specific music because of that. You know, like for me, if it's raining out here, which isn't very often, but when it does, that's my favorite time to write music, because for some reason that's just inspiring to me, and like the mood of like, you know, the grayness and like the rain and just like that atmosphere is like very relaxing, but also like motivating for some reason for me. Like a lot of people get bummed on the rain, but that's my favorite time is when it's raining, but it's also because we barely get it. So maybe that's why. But yeah, I think like music, you know, I don't know that I would define people like I would judge somebody if they were like a cool person and then they only listen to music I really didn't like, I wouldn't associate them negatively with that. So I don't really know like where the line gets drawn as far as like how much influence music has with someone's personality or something like that. But I do think that, you know, different types of music will invoke different feelings. There are times, you know, where I want to be like more fired up with something. I might listen to something heavier, more aggressive. And, you know, I think there's different times for different types of music. One of my favorite things to do was like, you know, if we're touring, if my band's on tour and we have like long overnight drives, there's certain types of music that I would cater to more in those moments. Like, you know, maybe like Massive Attack or, you know, Portishead or like something more like kind of, like Thievery Corporation that has like this kind of like vibe to it the whole time. Kind of like almost, I don't want to say drum and bass, but sort of that type, like a lo-fi type vibe. Those types of things I actually like a lot in those moments, but I wouldn't necessarily throw those on often otherwise. So like if I'm driving in my car to like go to the store, I'm probably going to listen to something a little more like exciting for that, you know, duration. But if it's something like, you know, a longer drive, I like the more vibed out stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, kind of a roundabout answer, but yeah, that's kind of what I think.
Roundabout answer's the best. It's the whole point of this. Sure. I can sympathize with the, you know, the changing mood. Decide like so we with my old band, whenever we'd leave the studio, like the music driving into the studio versus the music driving out of the studio, like late at night. Obviously you got a friend with you there.
Yeah. I should preface that as well. These guys, I have 2 dogs right here. They will probably bark at some point. I can mute myself, so I'll be conscious of that, but
keep it in.
Be ready for that. Cool. Yeah, anyway, go on.
Funnily enough, you know, I said about the student that showed me your stuff. I was teaching him earlier today, and his cat's always just like so that in common, I guess. But yeah, I know the music we would listen to going into the studio versus coming back. The music going in, it's like heavy metal, you know, and then coming back, it's always like the chill, kind of the more songwritery side of, or sometimes it would just be heavy, to be fair. I guess it depends how pumped we were after a day in the studio. But something I've been drawn to lately, I'm interested to hear where you sit with it. I've found myself leaning more towards like songwritery songs. By songwritery, I mean like more stripped back music. Whereas, I mean, metal is very much what I listen to like a lot of the time, but I've found myself being drawn more to, I've been listening to quite a lot of Jeff Buckley lately, you know, and like these kind of artists that are known for things like their use of harmony and like the more, I guess not stripped back is it so much, but yeah, focus on the song. Whereas obviously a lot of metalheads are, I don't want to say guilty of, because it's part of writing metal, are kind of guilty of the whole riff salad business, you know. I know I've been there for sure. Do you think with modern metal, what sort of direction can you see? So for example, like I said, I'm sort of almost leaning more towards some of these songwriter based artists right now, because I'm guessing perhaps in what I'm listening to, I'm looking for more harmony and more like sense of direction in the music there. Do you think there's a calling for that in modern metal at all, or can you see it going that way or the other way? Is there like a direction there?
I don't know. I think metal is kind of a very broad genre. Like, I mean, I guess any genre really is, but like metal, you know, there are bands that have a lot more melody to them and a lot more nuance and depth, like a band like Opeth, who I think can be the most extreme metal, but also be the most like melodic and sort of like intricate, maybe delicate, maybe like, you know, just really like there's a lot more depth to what they do than I think the average metal band. So to me, like I lean towards bands like that. Or, I mean, would you say Carnival's metal? Like, it's kind of like a weird thing, but I guess like to me, the metal that I am always most drawn to is either the most absolute like heavy kind of stuff like Meshuggah or Gojira, or I mean, even like, you know, any like the kind of like genre I tend to like as a whole. I don't know that I have like specifically favorite artists other than maybe Meshuggah, but like I like the sound of like some of that stuff, and I like how heavy and sort of like mindless some of that might be. Like, even though it's like technically crazy sometimes, like it's not really like there's not a lot going on past the rhythms. Like there's not always. Sometimes there's just, it's just about banging your head. And like I like that kind of essence of heavy music sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I've always been kind of drawn to the melody combined with that kind of heavy like aggression. So that's why, growing up, I really liked nu metal stuff like Korn and I guess Deftones and like all that kind of stuff, like because they capture those moments, but they also cater to the melody and sort of the creativity that could also happen with that kind of music. Because there is ways to kind of flow between very melodic moments and very heavy moments without sounding like two separate things entirely. And I feel like nu metal was a really good example of that, even though it kind of gets like made fun of sometimes. Like I know that genre is sort of like could be a joke in some ways to a lot of people because there were a lot of questionable artists in that time. But I think there's a lot to take away from it, kind of underneath the hood of that genre of just like some of the guitars are doing really cool shit, some of the vocals are really good, and I think the general kind of groove and like feel of that era of music really stuck with me too, because you can write all kinds of time signatures, but in the end of the day, if you're not feeling any of that, then it doesn't really, is that what you want? Like I want to listen to a song and like be able to, just be into it rather than having to think about what I'm listening to and just constantly have to like stop my head from moving because it's like switching time all the time, like 5 to whatever, just switching time signatures, and that's cool too. It's a different thing, but yeah, I've always been more drawn to just like the core of something like that. And I feel like with where metal might be going, it's hard to say because I feel like this can go down a huge rabbit hole, but I feel like the like social media and everything like that has kind of conflicted what feel might exist in music that I don't think is the goal at this point. I feel like the goal right now for a lot of people is to be as crazy as they can be and sort of show off in a way. And even if that becomes the natural, like their natural essence of playing, which is totally fine. Like if people enjoy that, then it is what it is. But for me, it's going to be harder for me to have something to take away if I can't feel anything that's going on, or if I can't step away from the song after I hear it and remember a part. So if it's just like constant riff after riff after riff of chaos and like, amazingness, technically, like, you're hearing some amazing guitars and stuff like that. But if I can't walk away and remember any of the riffs specifically, then it's not going to like keep me. So like for me, that's kind of where I come from. Like I come from bands that have a lot of feel, a lot of originality, and a lot of effort that they put into their music. And a lot of that also, I think, has to do with, the lack of accessibility. So I think like, growing up, there wasn't things like Instagram or immediate satisfaction of like, I can just open an app and see a million crazy riffs. I had to go to shows. I had to go to like watch MTV or like whatever. So like that kind of stuff, it's just a little different now. So I feel like bands writing music were coming from a place of their own, like what was cool to them in their head only, versus like immediately having direct feedback every time you write a riff. So like it's kind of a crazy thing. Like, if I write a riff and I share it on Instagram like an hour later, that's like a weird dynamic because I'm getting immediate feedback on something I might not even be finished with really. Like maybe I just wrote something, I thought it was cool and I share it, then people like it. Like that's like it's just like a weird thing, or they don't like it. Like that whole dynamic's like interesting. I think people spend potentially less time on average trying to be unique to themselves, and they're more possibly catering to an audience that is may or may not be like actually like as involved because there's a million other people they follow too. So it's just a weird thing. I don't know. I kind of forgot what the original question was. I think about it. But I
was going to say, have you seen?
This is going to happen a lot with me, I'm sure.
This is going to sound really irrelevant. I promise it's not. Have you seen the film Everything Everywhere All at Once? The new one?
Not yet. I want to. I'm lacking on that and like Top Gun and a couple movies right now.
Oh yeah, I want to see that. The reason being, we went through a few things, and when this happens all the time, when someone's talking to me, and I'll be like, okay, I have in my head, I'm like, I know what's interesting to say back to what you said, and then we'll just go past the point where, so I was going to make a joke about Headstrong, and then we got past the new metal thing, and then and then it kind of, and then in that film, what the idea of this person who sort of experiences everything at once. It's not a spoiler for the record. I kind of wish we could just have all the conversations at the same time, and whoever wanted to dip into each different one. Never mind, that's just my stupid thought process. But yeah, what I thought was interesting. Well, one thing, you talked about new metal and stuff and how people kind of dismiss it a little bit. There's something that sounds almost trivial, but it's actually really cool. On YouTube, there's this, I think it's on Spotify as well, there's a channel that makes like lullaby versions of metal tracks.
Nice.
Which obviously for, like the metal dads that don't want to listen to like Bar Bar Black Sheep anymore, they got an option now. But if you listen to some of the songs that you thought maybe were like a bit simple and a bit like, your kind of 90s new metal riffs, you listen to like Freak on a Leash or something, the harmony is really, and the interplay between the melody and the harmony is really cool. And you almost don't, there's a lot of major like tonality in it that you kind of almost don't pick up on in the darkness of the whole song. That sounds really English teacher syndrome, but you hear it.
Dude, I mean, that's the thing, especially with a band like Korn, like there's like, I always speak highly of them and dudes like Wes Borland and stuff like that, because there's a lot, that they were doing that no one else had done yet on guitar, and or at least not on like a commercial enough level for everyone to know. And when you listen to these old records and maybe some of the new ones as well, but like mostly the ones I grew up on, I know for sure, like there was a lot going on with the interplay between the two guitar players and the sounds that, as like an average music listener, you're not going to notice being guitars potentially. Like you're going to hear like you might write it off as like a DJ or like added sounds or something, but it's all guitars and stuff like that. And there's a lot of things that they're doing that are like really trippy and weird and like not remotely normal. So like when you listen to them, you might only think they're just heavy riffs or something like that, but when you actually like pay attention, you're like, oh shit, there's a lot of like little noises and sounds they do with their pedals and like things like that went over my head growing up. And then now when I like listen back, sometimes like I notice everything now because like I've been trying to do similar things as well. So like when I hear that, it's like, oh, it's crazy that they were doing that back then when they didn't have like a thing to pull from really. Like their inspirations were different than what ours would be now or like what people would have now. And it's cool that they were able to kind of create something new and sort of like lead a genre like entirely pretty much. Like I think they were the best of that new metal era. Like I think they were the most unique and the ones who stayed most true to like probably being new metal, like as a genre. And I hope that they're like stoked on that. I don't know what that feels like to be a band from that era and have that connotation. I don't think it's bad personally, but I know some people seem to think so. But I think it's a good thing. I think people should try to listen for the musicality more than like the essence of what maybe that genre seemed to be. I think like pay attention to the guitars and like the groove and kind of like the feel of some of those heavier bands and some of the, I mean, most of them were heavy. So I think if you are into metal, I feel like you would find something to like about all that stuff. Yeah,
I think it feels like there's sort of a hidden gem in every song. Like the producer that we were working with, we were talking about like drum fills and stuff, and we were trying all these complicated things, and then he pointed out, Soil Work, a song called Distance. I don't know if you know it. This might be a bit like specific, but there's this really cool like accelerating snare fill. It's literally just a snare roll, but he just goes but, and he goes up in the sort of up the stages of tempo, subdivision, speed and stuff. And it was so cool and so inventive. And the song, like the riffs and the guitar and the patterns were like simple enough, but almost that moment in itself just made me add the song to the playlist just because of that like
it's cool.
Memorable little thing. But so kind of rounding back to when you're talking about like the social media side of things and the how it's, I always find it interesting talking about how I can't remember who it was I was talking to about this, where we're referencing Master of Puppets and saying that like the time to turn around inspiration and influence. So, I could go and listen to and try my best to learn all your music. Might take me a while, but I could try. And then take in your influence and then turn something out similar to that, hopefully, if I'm okay at it. Sorry, it sounds like it could be like, so I can just write all this and turn it out. I don't mean that. I mean, I could take inspiration from you in pretty much real time. You're still active as a musician, and then be turning out music that might be similar in some way, like a few weeks after, whereas when Metallica and that lot were putting music out in sort of the 80s and stuff, I don't feel like that turnover was as quick. So now there's almost this, like, I do wonder if we're going to end up with a bit of an echo chamber where people just start turning out the same stuff because
I think that's already happening
to each other. Yeah.
I think that's already happened, but I think it's because, I mean, for instance, kind of what you're saying, like if you wanted to learn one of my songs and you saw me play it, if there's a video of me playing it and it's on YouTube, or even if it's not, wherever it is, you can pause it, you can watch it again, you can download it probably and like break it apart, whatever you need to do, you have more control over those things. And back when Metallica was out, like you had to go see them in person or wait till their record's released or wait for a music video, hope that they're in it performing the song. Otherwise you wouldn't see it until you saw them live. And it's just not like that anymore. Like now it's all about, the content and videos and things like that. So everyone has them and everyone's doing, tabs all the time. You got actual musicians tabbing their own songs and putting that out, including myself. So, that situation is just like a difference. It's just different now. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I do think people should be aware that, ideally, at least, you're still wanting to represent yourself as much as possible versus trying to sound like someone else. I think having the inspiration is one thing and the influence, but you always want to kind of find your own path. And I feel like as much as I enjoy music from, some of my friends' bands and things like that, I wouldn't listen to them so much to where I actually want to start sounding like them. So I'll listen and I'll always appreciate everything people do. And I just try to stay on my own path though. So like for me, I enjoy writing music from my head versus like hearing something and just doing that, I guess. And I think a lot of people, I don't know, it's weird though. It's hard. It's just so different. Like I can say these things, but I don't know what it's like to grow up right now. So I don't know what it's like to start from scratch and see insanely talented musicians every single day in your Instagram feed or TikTok or wherever you're watching stuff. Like there's so many really, really talented guitar players and people, every instrument right now that you can just have immediate access to. And I don't know what it's like to have that be what you're trying to learn. Like that's the crazy thing to me is like back in the day, I'm learning songs from, still challenging to things at times, but it's not every single band that I listen to that's crazy. Like there's things that I could play. And I feel like now if you're growing up learning, Jason Richardson, Polyphia, Animals Leaders, like you're setting a very high bar immediately but that is what's available to you. So it's kind of crazy. Like it's just a different time for people coming up in music right now.
Yeah. I think I was saying, I think it was, I don't know if you've seen him, Joao Medeiros. He does a lot of stuff on YouTube. But we're saying how there are bands even now that sound like Spirit Box. And Spirit Box haven't even been around big anyway for very long at all. And you're already hearing bands that kind of sound a bit like them. For better or worse, I guess you can make your own mind up on that. But something I was particularly interested to hear is from what I can tell, you output quite a lot of, whether not just pure material, but in terms of doing the Twitch, just generally. There's a lot of you online in some form, but your music or what you're doing. Does that feel like a sort of a bit of a mental strain to keep up with that level of output and just general presence? Kind of when you talk about the traditional musician, go back all those years, where your role was more about writing the music and kind of playing the shows. Do you feel that weighs on? The reason I particularly would ask this to you, maybe over other musicians, is that it seems like there's a real drive for creativity in what you're doing versus, say, take, for example, the extreme opposite, which would be someone that does a lot of like covers or session playing or something. Do you feel, that it's like, do you find it difficult mentally? Is it something that's difficult for you? And B, do you find it harms your creativity at all? I think how does it affect your creativity, I guess?
Yeah, I think both things kind of happen. I think, I guess to go back a little bit, like I've always enjoyed writing songs. Like even before I was in bands, like I would record just guitar into my computer using a crappy computer mic and I would just record guitar songs, and then I would bounce that onto a CD, and I would throw that in my CD player, and I'll go to school with headphones, and I'll listen to my own songs, and I would try to write and complete songs that were just guitar. I really, really wish I had those still. But anyway, so I was like 13 years old, 14 years old doing all that stuff. And it wasn't until like high school that I actually started jamming with bands and stuff like that. So I always kind of had a drive to just write. I always liked it. And, you know, when I started playing with Eric and Riley and Nightverses, we wrote all the time. We met up like 5 days a week for years, like writing songs and jamming and learning our songs and being able to play, you know, 20 songs at any given time that we've written. And so I got very used to that, and I got very comfortable in that environment of challenging myself and, you know, trying to come up with something often. And it was fun. And it was never something that I felt was like a struggle, or like, I mean, a struggle, you know, sometimes, but not in a way that I couldn't get to the end result. It was more just like always wanting to push ourselves to do better. And so for me, when I started doing Twitch, that was a really cool thing because up until that point, you know, I released some of my own music. Like I always kind of focused on Nightverses as like everything I would write would assume would go to that band. But there would reach a point where, you know, we're all writing stuff, and like, you know, in between records or something like that, maybe I would write something that wouldn't really fit Nightverses. And sometimes I would just casually throw that on my Bandcamp, or even before that, SoundCloud. And I would just release, you know, unfinished ideas sometimes on there, or just whatever, just random things I had, and never anything consistent. And so I never really gave much thought into those songs. It was always just kind of like random stuff that I was like, well, it's either going to sit on my computer and do nothing ever, or I'll just throw it on the internet and maybe one person will listen to it. I don't know. And then COVID hit, and, you know, the world shut down for a second, and my life didn't really change in the sense of like my work. So like I was still doing the same things anyway. So to me, I was like, well, I might as well just hop on Twitch and, you know, do this on there. And it actually became very inspiring because then I realized, you know, I have a purpose now to finish, like more incentive, really, not a purpose, but like I have incentive to actually finish songs and start songs, and kind of like it became really fun for me in the very beginning to like actually know, okay, I'm going to write these songs on the stream. I'm going to finish a song, and then I'm going to do this again to like every day and as much as I can throughout the week, and then release something every month. And like, it was kind of a fun thing to just kind of keep doing. And, you know, I had a lot of ideas that, you know, maybe I wouldn't be able to complete in Nightverses, or, you know, whatever. Like I just knew, you know, I can finally do entire songs off of purely everything in my head and like what I wanted to get out. You know, I got better at programming drums. I got, you know, a little faster with editing and recording and stuff. So that whole process it made me like a lot better at that as well, which translated into, you know, being better for Nightverses demoing or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, as far as it becoming draining on creativity, though, I will say that, you know, at this point, I've written 170 something songs on Twitch, which is like kind of an absurd amount if you really think about it. And I don't mean that from like any type of arrogance, just purely like it's a lot of songs. Like I wouldn't have ever in my entire life thought I would write that many songs just by myself. So with that concept, yeah, there are times where, you know, I'll catch myself not feeling as inspired, and I will still try to write something, and it becomes a little bit of a struggle because I don't want to put out things that are worse than something before. And I also don't want to like force myself to where I'm like unhappy doing what I'm doing, because that's never good. Like I never want music to feel like a sour situation where I'm just like, I don't want to do it today or something like that. And that happened a couple of times for sure. And you know, when that does happen, I try to look at those moments as the challenge for myself to be like, okay, this is what I want to be doing for my life. And if I get into these positions where I struggle and I can't think of something, I have to find a way out, and I have to think of something that allows me to break through this moment. And that might be like something as simple as switching guitars or changing tempo or changing, you know, tuning, anything random, starting a song on bass instead of guitar. So I'll push myself in different scenarios that, you know, might be initially uncomfortable for a second, but then it'll inspire something else, and you know, whatever it is. So yeah, there are times that happens for sure. And I think that's inevitable with anybody creating anything. I think you're going to hit ruts occasionally where like it's hard to kind of naturally feel inspired, and you have to kind of like make inspiration happen. But I do think that's a real thing as far as like, I think if you get stuck, I don't think you should stop. I think a lot of people say like walk away for a couple of weeks or days or whatever. I don't think that's entirely true. I think you should still push yourself, maybe go outside for a second or something like that to like refresh your eyes, but like come back and just do it again. Like just go. It's, you know, it's not something that should be like too comfortable. I think it should be, you should always be a little bit challenged with music. And I think, you know, the best stuff comes from when you're cornered and you actually like have to do something that, you know, will get you to the next point. And sometimes that's all it takes. And then sometimes literally like I'll catch myself, I'll write one part and then I erase everything else and I start from that point on or something like that. Or that part will then get me to a new section and then I delete the part that got me to that section. And now it's like, you never know what's going to happen. So I always just try to charge through those moments. But yeah, I mean, writing that much music is going to happen. I think it's easy to question yourself and overthink things and all that, get in your head about it. I do that, but I try to focus it and still power through.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think because yeah, people do say sort of step away, and the way I look at it is like if you think of every aspect of guitar playing and just musicality in general, you know, you learn and practice, or you know, you can learn and practice theory or lead playing like techniques, or you know, learning the fretboard, things like that. But no one talks about like you can practice songwriting, or you can practice, you know, or doing songwriting a lot. You can treat that in a way as practicing songwriting, even if you don't do anything that is like specifically songwriting practice as such. And I'm guilty right now of falling into a bit of a rut where it sounds, because what I was going to say is I'm glad that you've said it, basically, is that it sounds like you've got almost quite a positive upward spiral kind of. I was going to ask, have you ever found yourself falling into the opposite, where obviously say you don't write something one day that you like, or over a course of a week or a month or however long, and then obviously it becomes that little bit harder to then write the next thing, and then a little bit harder to write the next thing, because you become, you know, I feel like there's a lot of this exponential kind of, you know, you write something good so you feel a bit better, then you write something even better, and it has this nice upward curve, not perfectly obviously, and the same seems to happen in reverse. So have you ever found yourself on the kind of the side of things where you're thinking, I'm really not turning out what I want to here?
Sometimes. I have strategies though that I try to apply when I get into these positions. Like, you know, when you think about a guitar specifically, that's really what I would say I write the most with. I don't really like, I write drum beats sometimes first, but that's another thing I'm about to say. So on guitar, you have all these different things, right? You have harmonics, you have like slides, you have like sliding a riff, you have like a riff, you have chugs, you have all these different things you can do on guitar that create different sounds. So sometimes if you get into a position where you're like, man, I can't think of a riff, then think of something stupid, like write a riff that's all harmonics and just see what happens. And you might do something cool, you might not, but like you put yourself in these weird scenarios, you're probably going to do something, or at least spark some kind of idea that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And if anything, it leads you to something else. So maybe writing a riff in harmonics, maybe then I write a drum beat to that, and then that beat that I wrote to that riff maybe inspires a different riff, and then I try something else over that beat. So it's like kind of a never-ending cycle of just, you know, putting yourself in these weird positions to try different things. And sometimes the results are great. Sometimes, you know, they don't really get you anywhere, but it keeps you moving and it keeps you trying things, and it keeps like, you know, the flow basically. But yeah, if I'm being honest, like right now, I was just talking about this with my friend. I really like, I haven't written much of my own music in the last month. I mean, I just recently got married, and, you know, I've been kind of like focused on different things in the last kind of month. Other than, I mean, Nightverses, we've been trying to finish our record. So most of any inspiration I have has been going towards that and trying to like wrap our record up with the guys as much as we can. And so anything that I have like idea wise has been mostly going towards there. And I haven't really been streaming as much as I used to. Like I've been kind of focused on, I guess, that and just like life stuff. So with that in mind, like my brain has kind of gone to a blank state, in the sense of like, when I have the time to get back on all that stuff, I feel like I'm starting over again from my writing inspiration. And I don't include Nightverses in that, because I think Nightverses is like an ever it'll just always be there in my head. And I'm collaborating with other people, so it's a little different because Eric, our drummer, he'll provide inspiration for me if I don't have any anyway. So like he'll show up with something that makes me do something that I wouldn't have done by myself. So, and same with Riley, like these scenarios happen often with them. So I never really worry about, my writing progress in that band because I always have two other guys that are, active. So yeah, for myself though, I would say right now is probably the least I've written solo music wise in a while. And then I also have my project Headcave, which we have a couple new songs that we've written. And that's something where I'm a little bit more hard on myself as far as I'm the only one writing music in that band. So I have like a goal for that project at all times that I want to achieve. And sometimes I hit it, sometimes I don't. Sometimes Nick, our vocalist, will save maybe a not so great of an idea on music because he's a great vocalist. And sometimes my simplicity that I don't like on certain parts will sound better because he's singing on it. And then I can like sit back and reimagine the song a little bit. But yeah, man, I mean, it happens to everybody. I feel like getting in like creative ruts is just part of the process. But I think it's important to not allow yourself to be looking at it negatively. I think you just need to accept that sometimes you need to think outside the box to inspire more ideas. And sometimes you just don't have an idea for that moment. And maybe you do step away for a sec or watch a movie or watch something else creative that will inspire something else. Because I think there's a lot of inspiration to take from like, visual components as well. And that could be movies, TV shows, art, whatever. So try to find other ways to, inspire yourself and don't allow yourself to get into a rut where you don't do anything. Fortunately, I do have Nightverses and Headcave. So even if I'm not writing my own music, I have those projects to focus on and like know that there's at least a guideline to those. So yeah. And writing my own music like on Twitch, that's always something I did for fun anyway. It wasn't really something I was like necessarily pursuing as like my career as like a solo artist. It's more just like kind of a conglomerate. It's like everything that I do is like all my bands and that stuff. So I didn't really have like a standard for that music as much as I would for Nightverses or Headcave.
Yeah, I think the writer it's interesting. Yeah, I find it quite sort of reassuring to hear it from you because I'm thing is right now it's the irony is I'm kind of letting myself be a bit stuck in a rut. I mean, I recently left my band, so it's kind of like naturally it's a bit of a kind of figuring out what direction I want to go in. So I'm taking a bit of a writing break, which maybe it's not an active thing. It's not. Well,
think about it like a muscle, right? Like if you're working out, you're staying in shape. If you stop working out, you lose that. So if you stop writing, you're not like you're stopping the progress entirely. So like if you keep writing, even if you're not writing the best stuff ever, you're keeping the brain flowing, you're thinking of things, you're pushing yourself to do something. So I feel like stopping writing entirely is more and I'm not saying this to you, but it's more of like a lazy situation and kind of like a comfort thing than it is actually like a real beneficial thing. Because I think like if you stop, then like everyone else is still going, everything else, like everything's still happening. So if you stop, you're not doing anything at that point. Like you're I mean, literally, obviously. So if you're writing, even if you're not doing the best stuff, like you're still going. So eventually 10 songs in, one of those songs is going to be decent. And it's just what happens. So I feel like you should never stop unless you actually want to stop and you don't care about writing music. Yeah. I mean, straight up, if I wasn't doing the Nightverses stuff right now, I would be probably writing more of my own stuff, but my time has gone into that amongst a few other things. And that's just, keep it going. If you have the time to do it, obviously not everyone has all the time to do that, but any time that you do have, I think you should spend, being creative and not allowing yourself to stop if you don't have to stop.
Yeah, it's definitely underappreciated, the idea of working out your creativity, I think. So I've been really interested lately in the whole sort of, I guess the psychology behind a lot of things like motivation and that. And this sounds like I'm in some sort of deep motivational route. It's not so much that. I just find it kind of interesting. But I have a little kind of, not theory, I guess it is, But so when you so for example, like dopamine, this kind of this thing that drives us to do things. Obviously the more when you look at things like addiction, for example, like you always sort of people always just start small and then end up having these massive cravings that can lead to sort of addictions. Obviously, in less addictive things, it's why we pursue certain things because we get rewards out of them. And so, for example, if I sit down and write some music and I enjoy that, that's positive, and I'm going to want to go and do it again. And with all these things, like for example, you get a reward when you write a cool riff and you put it on Instagram, or you do it live on Twitch, and then there are people there, you get that like feedback, and not only that, but you have the knowledge that you're outputting something and kind of being productive in it, kind of in a more commercial sense. But then, so what happens is obviously if you get used to this higher sense of reward from what you're doing than you would purely get from writing on the guitar on its own, if you then take away that external reward, i.e. the likes on Instagram or the views on Twitch or whatever, or the followers, then actually do you think there's a risk possibly that the intrinsic reward of just playing the guitar is actually reduced? And I can tell you for a fact this has happened to me, where sometimes I've sat down with a guitar and almost thought, if I'm not on Twitch or if I'm not writing for like an Instagram video or something, sometimes my head just goes, oh, well, what are we doing this for? And it's like, I know I love doing it. It's not that. It's not like a kind of oh, I'm bored of this. I still do it. But you have those moments of like, I guess if you just sit down and play guitar for yourself, like I said, you're not getting those other sort of like compounding rewards of likes.
No, you're right. I think that's an important thing to note. And I think that is happening it probably happens to a lot of people. I think occasionally maybe I've thought that in the sense of like, I think it comes down to more like, oh, I haven't posted in a while and I'm going to write something just so that I have something to post. So I'm still relevant to some people, because the reality is everything is just so immediate and people forget about you in like 2 seconds if you're not active on social media. It's a weird thing. And I think it's a weird thing to get used to and to adapt to. But I think it is what it is. This is the time that we live in, and it's important. If you have a business, you want to like maintain a business and progress your business, you have to be relevant, or have some type of epic project or a product that will last you the time. So maybe you put out the best metal record ever written and you can just ride that for the next couple of years or something.
Oh, but that's sorry.
So, wait, what?
I said, oh, I've already done that. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing. I mean, I would never act like I haven't considered those scenarios, but I think I don't let those things drive me, because, and I honestly, like, if you follow me on Instagram, I haven't posted much at all in the last 2 months. And I used to post, at least like once a week, twice a week, sometimes more. But I've kind of backed off of that because aside from actually being busy, like I also just haven't, I felt like I don't want to be in a position where it's dictating what I'm doing. Like, I don't want to like feel like, oh, I need to post something because I haven't posted. Like I stopped wanting to think about that. And so now if I have something to share or advertise or whatever, I'll do it. But I'm not, on my daily basis thinking about social media as much as I used to. I also like was able to fortunately establish like a little bit of something on there. So when I do have something to share, like, fortunately there are some people that I guess want to hear it or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing, but I would encourage people now, like if you're starting off on that stuff, I would encourage people to push it and like try to get some type of thing going on there, because it makes things a lot easier in the long run. And it also, that's where the audience is. Like, you're not going to be going out and playing shows if you don't have a band that's ready to play shows. And even if you are playing shows, there's no guarantee there's going to be people there. Whereas if you post a video on Instagram, it's pretty much a guarantee at least 50 people are going to see it. And then if you get more of that building, you can get thousands of people seeing it. That's way more people than you're ever going to perform in front of possibly in your life. So like all that stuff with that in mind, like it's pretty important and valuable right now to be active on social media. And I'll get back to it eventually. Like when I start feeling, like I want to, then I will. But I'll probably post something, today because I'm talking about it now. And I'm thinking about it. But yeah, I think it's a weird dynamic, and I think, you know, you just need to be conscious of it not running your life. And I think you should always maintain quality over quantity, and try to you know, always do your best version of yourself, and not worry too much about catering to an audience that maybe doesn't reflect what you actually want to be doing. I think that's kind of important to keep in mind when doing Instagram stuff or whatever, because it's very easy to get caught up in that. Like, oh, my last video was super fast on my riff and everybody liked it, so I need to do another one like that, even though that's not really your style or something. And then it's like the next one doesn't do as well. So now you're like, oh, what do I do? Like, people don't like it. It's like, just do what you think is good, and people will either follow or they won't. And that's kind of like what I try to think about when I do that stuff.
Yeah, I think so two things. I think one of the biggest failings of a lot of people, and I'm sure I've been guilty of it, I like to think maybe I'm not as much now, but is posting content, like you said, based on the response from, and you got to be somewhat responsive and sort of you got to have your ear out for like what people enjoy.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the ultimate irony is if you just do what you enjoy and you do that well, there's a really, really high chance that there's quite a lot of people out there that like that. And I think I found myself, so I had a bit of a sort of binge of like putting out, you know, 2 Instagram videos a week, not even for that long really. And I found it a bit of a chore because I was looking at it as I'm playing guitar so that I can put out 2 Instagram videos this week, not I'm playing loads of guitar, so I guess I'll put out 2 videos this week. And I think that it's like, it's the same end result, you know, in terms of output, but the mental, where you land at the end of the week mentally is so different. And I think that probably didn't help me before. It sounds like you've got a good thing going though, in terms of how you,
I think you're
what you like, basically.
I think what you're saying is important as far as like, you know, it depends what your goal is overall with music or your guitar in general. Like for me, I want to have a lifelong career of music. So I have no intention of stopping this stuff. So like if I have that mentality, then it's all a job as well as it is enjoyable. So to me, if I need to maintain relevance, then I'll post a couple of videos. If I want to advertise something I'm doing, I'll post some videos, whatever. Like that is part of the gig of like all of this stuff. That is your resume. So if you're, you know, posting guitar videos and you maybe like, you know, you have to like start from somewhere, right? Like, so you have to be doing something to have some type of thing for people to come find. Like they see one of your videos. If you have 5 more videos, then they have 5 more videos to watch when they find your first video that they found. So it's kind of an important thing to consider is like, how much do you have available for people to see or hear or whatever? And, you know, if you already have a lot of that stuff, then maybe you don't need to post every single day. But if you didn't have all that stuff, then you should be actively uploading and being, you know, relevant to, you know, your social media pages or whatever, because it really is your resume. Like that's how I look at it. And I think people have found me through Instagram purely. Like I have not met over half the people that I interact with on there probably. And, you know, it's been a good networking tool. And I think people should look at it as that and as a way to advertise yourself. And even though I say things like, don't, you know, let it run you, I do think you should be considerate of it. And I think if it's something you want to pursue, then just like make sure you treat it seriously, like anything else, like a job. Like sometimes it does suck to film a video and edit a video or write a riff purely for a video. You know, I've spent an entire day doing just a 30-second video before. And at the end of it, it's like, was it really the most valuable thing I could have done? And then all of a sudden some dude follows me or something like that. I'm like, okay, cool. That he found me because of this video. Like that's good. And so like, you never know whether it's working with companies, you know, that's the other thing too. People ask me sometimes like, how do you get endorsed? And it's like, well, are you on tour? No. Okay. Do you have a band? No. Are you doing anything on the internet? Like it's those, like you have to have eyes on your stuff. So if you want to be an endorsed artist, then you're not on tour in front of people, then you should be actively putting stuff on the internet to where you can develop a following there, because the eyes are the same wherever you are. If you're on tour or you're on the internet, it's the same amount of views, if not more views on the internet. So I don't know, man. It's a weird It's a weird thing, but it is something that I think is just what it is now. So you have to adapt to those things and you have to be considerate of those things. Some people are way better at it than other people. Whether it's the camera you use, the angle you choose, the lighting, like how well you record yourself on the audio side. Like there's so many different layers to consider, and how you implement all that stuff. You know, sometimes none of that matters. Sometimes it's the dude with the crappiest phone recording, but looks the most authentic. And so you watch him and you're like, that guy is definitely playing that. I can hear it. I can hear his strings. I see him struggle on that riff or whatever. And that's more appealing than watching the perfect, polished, super HD, perfected recording of this other guy. You know, it's like, it just varies. It's all just a weird game. But it's a game that I think is important to be aware of how to play, I guess.
So like from the outside in, listening to you, it sounds like I kind of don't want to make too many assumptions, but it sounds like you kind of aren't. It doesn't sound like social media is the sort of the crippling thing to you that it can be to some other people. But do you personally feel like you deal well with just kind of the online world and things like screen time and all that stuff? Do you feel like you deal with that well? Because from the outside in, and just like I said, from just sheer output and all that, and you talked about how many songs you've written and stuff. Do you personally feel like you deal well with that, or is it a bit of an uphill struggle still?
I mean, I think everyone kind of has their own sort of like battles with it. Like I feel weird sometimes sharing like anything personal or anything like that isn't music focused. I think I'm in a weird spot where the majority of people who follow me probably don't care about, you know, what I had for dinner, but they want to see a riff. And maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe they want to see what I'm like. It's just such a weird thing. So to me, like I look at it more as like, if I want to show somebody my Instagram page because I want them to work, I want to work with them or something like that, I'd rather them see just a barrage of music things that I've done versus like me hanging out with my friends or doing whatever. Like that's not relevant to what my career is. So, or at least not really. So like all that stuff. I mean, yeah, I think it's sometimes weird, you know, even thinking about captions for a post. Like the situation of sitting in front of your camera, playing a riff, editing that video, then sharing it with people on the internet, and like you need to say something about it or don't. But then if you don't, the algorithm doesn't catch it right. You know, it's like there's so many stupid things about it that you have to think about. And so even that, or it's like if you don't say something, then people don't take you, they don't have that personal attachment to it because you didn't put any touch to it, even though you spent hours writing and editing this video. If you don't put a caption to that is somewhat engaging, then it might just go through the shit and like no one sees it kind of thing. Like it's so weird. So yeah, I struggle thinking about these things for sure. Like I've spent way too much time writing a caption that ended up being an emoji. So it's like you never know like what different things will happen or what takes off, all that stuff. Like I've had videos do way better than other videos that I put way less time into. You know, there are things that I've definitely posted where I've spent literally probably 20 minutes writing something, recorded it in that moment and just threw it up. And that did better than something I spent hours on with multiple angles and whatever. So I don't know. I don't think there's like a rule, but I think there is, the only rule I would say is just like activity will benefit you. I mean, I've seen people that I've followed start with like 5,000 followers and have gone up to like 20, 30,000 in the last couple of months just because they're active as hell. They're always posting stuff. They're always hashtagging. They're always tagging people. Other companies repost them. Like all that stuff. Like because you're active, you also give that perception of being active. Like if you're posting stuff on there, people think you're doing stuff all the time, and it's a good thing. And you probably are. Like that's not to take away from any assumption of that. I just mean the idea that, you know, you look active. And I think that's important for a lot of people because like as soon as you seem inactive, then people don't think about you. So like they don't know, or they wonder. Maybe some people like who really care might wonder what you're doing, but other people will forget. They'll move on to the next person that is active. Yeah,
it's crazy. It's funny actually you say that. Like this goes right back to the something you said really early on when we were chatting, like within the first few minutes, where you said about this drive to be that bit more crazy, or like basically stand out, because it's a fight for attention, a lot of it. not in the same way perhaps that there was before the internet. Do you feel like the fight, this kind of need to grab attention, how do you think that's kind of affecting music, or is it have you like seen the effects of it? I mean, so for example, just when I spoke to George Lever quite a while back, he was saying about how a lot of songs are kind of becoming more front heavy, where like you get a chorus really early. But do you think this attention, I don't want to call it attention grabbing, but it kind of is in that sense, you know, that, but in the more like career sense, not just in the like me kind of sense.
No, for sure.
Changing music.
I think it's had a arguably negative effect on music, as well as sort of some positive, but I think the negative effect really to me is that point really is the attention grabbing situation. Like people are writing for social media posts versus writing for just the quality of a good album. So it's like people are focused on the single mentality versus the collective like concept, which isn't, and you know, it's whatever. I don't know if that's the worst thing. Like I think for someone like me, like I don't listen to a lot of full albums that often now. Like the last one I listened to was Porcupine Tree, and start to finish, like I just threw it on. I didn't touch it. I was painting a room, so I just had it playing, and that was the last CD in a while that I've like thrown on like that. On average though, I'll listen to like a song or two sometimes, but I don't really listen to a lot of music that often unless I'm on tour or like doing something like painting or whatever, something, you know, activity wise. But yeah, I think the idea of these people, you know, there is kind of a weird sort of competition with social media. I think that's like not necessarily discussed, but it kind of just is. So it's like you see one guy be crazy, and then this other guy wants to be crazier, and like all this stuff like kind of just snowballs into now everybody's playing at the max of their ability, it seems. And is that fun? Like, is that what you want to be doing? Like, I don't want to play at the max of my ability every single time I pick up my guitar. Sometimes I just want to play just something that makes me feel good. And that's not to say that I don't have stuff that's challenging, but when I pick up my guitar, my initial thought isn't how am I going to top my last shreddy ass riff? Like I never think that way. And I mean, I have thought that way before, but on average, I don't. So I think for a lot of people right now, you kind of get yourself into this position where potentially at least where people just want that from you. So if you put out 5 videos that are absolutely insane and then your next video isn't, is that affecting your career negatively now? Like, are people going to like, you know, think less of that, or do they care? Like it's kind of a weird thing because you set your own bar really by doing things like that. And I also think like it also puts you in a position to where if you ever do play live, you're going to have everybody like this trying to make sure that they catch your slip ups and stuff. And like, it's like a weird thing. And I don't like it. I don't like that dynamic. I think, you know, for some people, it probably works better than others. And I think it on the positive side, I think it's made some insane guitar players and insane musicians that wouldn't have gotten this crazy without it. And it's also, you know, it's inspiring to see sometimes as well. Like I'll see some people on there and just be like, damn, like it makes me want to get better just in general. Cause I'm like, well, if that's even possible, then I need to also get somewhere in that territory so I can use that as a way to incorporate new ideas into my music. Like there's techniques I've seen that, you know, blew my mind, and just random stuff like that. That can happen where, you know, you see someone just play something insane and you wouldn't have thought that was even possible before. And then you see it happen, even if it's like, you know, potentially not real or something like that. I know some controversy happens with social media here and there, but regardless of that, the composition exists. So because there is somebody sitting there writing it, you have to separate those two things. This is a kind of a different argument point here, but there's always the songwriting part and the performance part. And I've had a very long conversation about this several times with different people. But for me, I try to separate those two things. So if somebody writes something amazing and they don't perform it as amazingly, like I separate the two parts. I think the writing part should be equally impressive, but in a different way, other than the performance part. But yeah, that being said, I do think it's weird, and I hope people, mostly I hope the youth growing up right now with all this going on, I hope that there's a way for them to still get the feel of music more than purely the challenging element. I don't think it should only be about how fast and crazy you can play. I think it should also be about capturing mood and energy and like representing yourself as an individual. And if you're representing yourself and what you feel is those crazy riffs, then do it, go full out with that. But if you feel like you're doing something that isn't really true to like your essence as a musician or artist or whatever, then, take a step back and think about like, what is it do you actually want to do? And then do that instead. Cause I feel like there's no reason to get caught up in all that stuff unless you want to. And it's pretty hard. There's a lot of really good players out there. So if you're trying to compete, better start getting your chops up.
Yeah. That's a really good positive kind of note to sort of come to some sort of conclusion on, which is nice. I'll have a look on Twitch. I haven't actually looked at it at all, so it could, like I said, I'm not massively active on Twitch.
Oh yeah, I'm not looking right now either.
We'll have a I'm gonna hear myself for a split second here. I have no idea if there's anyone watching this at all. One person. Nice. There you go. I have no idea who one person is. But yeah, so what I do need you to do is ask a question for the next guest to start their conversation. It can be whatever you want, any theme, or it can be funny or deep and meaningful, whatever works. You can completely embarrass me. I had to just so you've got some context. I have asked some properly, deep and meaningful questions. The last one, Baard from Leprous. Baard, the drummer of that band, yeah. The artwork on his wall can only really be described as 2 4x4 foot artistic interpretations of genitalia, and he got a photo of him and showed it to the next guest and said, "Would you have my artwork on your wall?" So you can drop me in it as much as you like, really.
I guess I'd be curious, what do you think is next, like, for music? Like, where, like, I guess more like metal music or like the genres that we're kind of discussing. Like, what do you think is next? And yeah, I mean, really that. It's like, what is the next chapter of this era? We saw nu metal, then we saw like the screamo stuff, we saw gent. Where is it now? And like, what is coming next? Because it's like, I'm very curious to see, like the youth right now. I feel like music is going to be even crazier because of the standards set by so many insane, like, internet musicians, and even beyond internet musicians. Like, obviously the bands are also get crazier. But when I say internet musicians, I just mean people who are literally like, they're not in bands, they're just posting crazy stuff. And, it's created careers for some people. And yeah, like, what's next? Like, what comes after the social media era? Or does it remain? I don't know.
I'm tempted just to ask, like, just go, what's next? Like, just see
for life.
Yeah, what's next? Like, what is next?
Aliens.
Elon Musk, Mars, and aliens, and nukes.
Down.
It's pretty much all of it. And if you could plug an artist that you think deserves some love as well.
Man, see, that's hard.
You won.
Just one, you said? I mean, I'm going to plug my friend's band, Traditions. Cool. I've recorded a couple of things with these guys, and they're good, heavy music. And they, I would say, come from a place of just being kind of like badass, heavy shit. And I think that's cool.
I want that. I want like a tattoo of that on myself.
Yeah, I mean, I would say them. I don't really know, like, I miss the era of being very part of my local scene of music, but I don't really have that attachment anymore. So now it's kind of whatever comes to me. I'm going to say them, and I'm also going to throw one more, even though you said not to. Adrian Ballou. He's an acoustic guitar player, and he's great.
How do you spell his name? Sorry, just so I know who I'm looking for.
Good question. Let me make sure I get it right. I think it's...
Is it Beaul?
No.
No, not like that. Okay.
Wait, maybe. Hold on. I got it. He just sent me some music I need to listen to
First play?
first. I would have had this prepared had I known. My bad. Okay. Adrian, Adrian,
Yep.
and then Bellue, Bellue.
Oh, okay, cool. Nice.
Yeah, he's dope. He's got some other music out. I'm sure he's about to drop something new that he just sent me as well pretty soon. But I would say if I was to play acoustic guitar, I'd want to play like he plays. I think he's great and definitely worth checking out.
Get some heavy metal lullabies on there. So,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
he's like dark with it. That's why I like it. Like his music's like it's got that kind of moody overtone that I'm always drawn to. And so yeah, certain songs of his are very good for that.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, if there's any last thing you want to plug for yourself or a message for the world, and
Sure. I mean, I have a bunch of music on my Bandcamp page, nickdepirro.bandcamp.com. Obviously, follow me on Instagram for riff videos and things like that. And then Headcave is my other project outside of Nightverses. Headcave will have some new stuff pretty soon here before the end of the year, I would say. And then we got a couple things out already. Nightverses, we are figuring out our studio situation now. So record is almost done for anyone that is waiting for that. And yeah, pretty much it, I guess.
awesome, man. Well, thank you.
Yep.